A biography of Tadeo Isidoro Cruz, 1829 to 1874. I'm looking for the face I had before the world was made. Yeats, in The Winding Stair. On February the 6th, 1829, the Montoneros, who by this time were being hounded by Laval, were marching northward to join Lopez's divisions. They halted at a ranch whose name they did not know, 3 or 4 leagues from the Pergamino. Toward dawn, one of the men had a haunting nightmare. In the gloom of the large bunkhouse, his confused cry woke the woman that was sleeping with him. No one knows what his dream was, because the next day at 4 o'clock the Montoneros were put to rout by Sora's cavalry, and the pursuit went on for 9 leagues, all the way to the now dusky stubble fields, and the man perished in a ditch, his skull split by a saber from the wars in Peru and Brazil. The woman was named Isidoro Cruz. The son she bore was given the name Tadeo Isidoro. It is not my purpose to repeat the story of his life. Of the days and nights that composed it, I am interested in only one. About the rest I will recount nothing but that which is essential to an understanding of that single night. The adventure is recorded in a very famous book, that is, in a book whose subject can be things to all men, 1 Corinthians 9:22, for it is capable of virtually inexhaustible repetitions, versions, perversions. Those who have commented upon the story of Tadeo Isidoro Cruz, and there are many, stress the influence of the wide plains on his formation, but gauchos just like him were born and died along the forested banks of the Paraná and in the eastern mountain ranges. He did live in a world of monotonous barbarity. When he died in 1874 of the Black Pox, he had never seen a mountain or a gas jet or a windmill, or a city. In 1849, he helped drive a herd of stock from Francisco Xavier Acevedo's ranch to Buenos Aires. The drovers went into the city to empty their purses. Cruz, a distrustful sort, never left the inn in the neighborhood of the stockyards. He spent many days there, taciturn, sleeping on the ground, sipping his getting up at dawn and lying down again at orisons. He realized, beyond words and even beyond understanding, that the city had nothing to do with him. One of the peons, drunk, made fun of him. Cruz said nothing in reply, but during the nights on the return trip sitting beside the fire, the other man's mockery continued, so Cruz, who had never shown any anger or even the slightest resentment, killed him with a single thrust of his knife. Fleeing, he took refuge in a swamp. A few nights later, the cry of a crested screamer warned him that the police had surrounded him. He tested his knife on a leaf. He took off his spurs so they wouldn't get in his way when the time came. He would fight before he gave himself up. He was wounded in the forearm, the shoulder, and the left hand. He gravely wounded the bravest of the men who'd come to arrest him. When the blood ran down between his fingers, he fought more courageously than ever. Toward dawn, made faint by the loss of blood, he was disarmed. Back then, the army served as the country's prison. Cruz was sent to a small fort on the northern frontier. As a low private, he took part in the civil wars. Sometimes he fought for his native province, sometimes against it. On January 23rd, 1856, at the Cardoso Marshes, he was one of the 30 Christian men who, under the command of Sergeant Major Eusebio Laprida, battled 200 Indians. He was wounded by a spear in that engagement. There are many gaps in his dark and courageous story. In about 1868, we come across him again on the Pergamino, married or domesticated, the father of a son, the owner of a parcel of land. In 1869, he was made sergeant of the rural police. He had set his past right. At that point in his life, he should have considered himself a happy man, though deep down he wasn't. In the future, secretly awaiting him, was one lucid, fundamental night, the night when he was finally to see his own face, the night when he was finally to hear his own true name. Once fully understood, that night encompasses his entire story, or rather, one incident or action that night does, for actions are the symbol of ourselves. Any life, however long and complicated it may be, actually consists of a single moment, the moment when a man knows forevermore who he is. It is said that Alexander of Macedonia saw his iron future reflected in the fabulous story of Achilles, Charles the XII of Sweden in the story of Alexander. It was not a book that revealed that knowledge to Tadeo Isidoro Cruz, who did not know how to read. He saw himself in a hand-to-hand cavalry fight and in a man. This is how it happened. During the last days of June in the year 1870, an order came down for the capture of an outlaw wanted for 2 murders. The man was a deserter from the forces on the border, under the command of Colonel Benito Machado. In one drunken spree, he had killed a black man in a whorehouse, in another, a resident of the district of Rojas. The report added that he came from Laguna Colorada. It was at Laguna Colorada 40 years earlier that the Montoneros had gathered for the catastrophe that had left their flesh for birds and dogs. Laguna Colorado was where Manuel Meza's career began before he was executed in the Plaza de la Victoria as the snare drums rolled to drown out the sound of the man's fury. Laguna Colorado was where the unknown man who fathered Cruz had been born before he died in a ditch with his skull split by a saber from the battles in Peru and Brazil. Cruz had forgotten the name of the place. With a slight but inexplicable sense of uneasiness, he recognized it. On horseback, the outlaw, harried by the soldiers, wove a long labyrinth of turns and switchbacks, but the soldiers finally cornered him on the night of July 12th. He had gone to ground in a field of stubble. The darkness was virtually impenetrable. Cruz and his men, cautiously and on foot, advanced toward the brush in whose trembling depths the secret man lurked or slept. A crested screamer cried. Tadeo Isidoro Cruz had the sense that he had lived the moment before. The outlaw stepped out from his hiding place to fight them. Cruz glimpsed a terrifying apparition. The long mane of hair and the grey beard seemed to consume his face. A well-known reason prevents me from telling the story of that fight. Let me simply recall that the deserter gravely wounded or killed several of Cruz's men. As Cruz was fighting in the darkness, as his body was fighting in the darkness, he began to understand. He realized that one destiny is no better than the next, and that every man must accept the destiny he bears inside himself. He realized that his sergeant's epaulettes and uniform were hampering him. He realized his deep-rooted destiny as a wolf, not a gregarious dog. He realized that the other man was he himself. Day began to dawn on the lawless plain. Cruz threw his cap to the ground, cried that he was not going to be a party to killing a brave man, and he began to fight against the soldiers, alongside the deserter, Martin Fierro.